Welcome to the YouTube Creators Hub podcast, where we help you conquer the internet one video at a time. We cover everything from how to start a YouTube channel to how to make a video go viral. And now, here's your host, the one and only Dusty Porter.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 304 of the YouTube Creators Hub podcast. Dusty here, the host of the show, coming at you with another wonderful interview. As always, if you do not know, every single Friday, I release an interview with a wonderful YouTube creator, and I chat with them about their strategy, their techniques, the things that they've done to position themselves in a successful state on YouTube. So if you're looking to either start, grow, or monetize your YouTube channel, this is the podcast for you. I'm here to be transparent. I'm here to basically, I'm not here to do anything but to help you along your journey. And I think these conversations can help you do that. I've interviewed now over 230 YouTube creators, and I do think that even going all the way back to episodes 2, 3, 4, and 5, you can still find some value. So if you've just now started listening and you're like, man, I can't wait for the next interview next week, go back and listen to some of those older interviews. I don't get any money. I don't get any revenue from that. As we are a sponsor-based show, I've already been paid for those shows, if there was even a sponsor there. So I'm not trying to get paid. I'm not trying to get, make any more money. I truly believe that there is value there in those older episodes. So definitely go back and check those out if you haven't already. We continue to grow here on the podcast. And speaking of that, one of the ways that you can help us grow absolutely for free is to leave us a review. Whether you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, Spotify, leave us a review. Let folks know how valuable this podcast truly is. And if you don't like the show, let us know that as well. We always want to know what we can do better, how we can improve, and how we can make the show more valuable for our awesome audience that we've created here in this beautiful community around the YouTube Creators Hub podcast. Now, do want to give a huge shout out, speaking of money and supporting the show, to TubeBuddy. If you haven't tried TubeBuddy or do not use TubeBuddy to either find keywords to use for your videos, to A/B test thumbnails, to quickly replace text in your descriptions for, hundreds and thousands of videos, that's just a few of the things that TubeBuddy can help you with. If you go to the description, the podcast notes of this episode, you'll see something that says try TubeBuddy for free for 30 days. You will get a 30-day free trial. That's right, a full month by using our code, by using our link in the show notes. It'll help us out. It'll help you out. It's a win-win. Also, got to find folks over at patreon.com/DustyPorter. If you support us at the advisor tier or higher, you get a shout out, whether it be your YouTube channel, your website, just your name, whatever it may be, on an episode each month of the podcast. And those shout outs for this month will happen next week. So for all of you, I truly appreciate it. All right, with all the house cleaning stuff out of the way, let's go ahead and jump into this week's conversation. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to this week's episode of the YouTube Creators Hub podcast. This is the conversation portion of the show. I am joined today by Will Gibbons, who is a product visualization specialist who teaches others how to turn 3D models into photorealistic images and animations. His YouTube channel, which is after his name, Will Gibbons, now has over almost 26,000 subscribers, a great community over there, and a wonderful educational type content that he produces each and every week. Will, how are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic, Dusty. Thank you.
Well, thank you for agreeing to come on the show. I'm going to be honest, I have no idea what you do. I've watched a handful of your videos, and they're very informative, but I'm super excited about you kind of sharing with us the journey that you've had thus far on YouTube. So what made you transition into YouTube? Tell us the story of how the channel was born and kind of what happened along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up in Michigan, and I actually studied product design when I went to college. So anything you own, someone's designed it. I went to school to learn how to do that. And after that, I worked at a bicycle company in Southern California for a few years. When my girlfriend was actually accepted into med school, we moved to rural Pennsylvania, and relocating there left me without any job prospects, just given where we were. So I tried freelancing for a little bit. At that time, I was learning more 3D modeling and rendering, which I dabbled in college, but really didn't, I'd say, master by any degree. So I really enjoyed using a 3D rendering software called KeyShot at that time, and that's what I teach now. So in late 2015, I had uploaded a few tutorials about how to use KeyShot to YouTube, and all my learning at that point had come from trial and error and website forums, things like that. but I wanted to create tutorials that would help people learn the program faster in a more engaging way. And one of those first few tutorials captured the attention of the company that actually makes the software. And eventually they offered me a job as a global training specialist. So for 3 years, I traveled and I taught Keyshot to design and engineering teams around the world. And when I wasn't teaching, I was creating tutorials and webinars on the software. So in 2019, I actually resigned from that job and I went back to freelancing, offering rendering and animation services to my clients. And after a couple of years of that, I actually decided it was time to chase my dream of being a creator, which I've had for quite a long time. And so since then, I've released paid Keyshot masterclass courses early last year. And with that success, I decided to go all in on YouTube and paid courses. And last month, I released my second flagship course, and it went really well. And so now I'm settling into a rhythm where I release 1 or 2 courses a year, and the rest of my time is spent making free content, primarily on YouTube.
And so let me just kind of explain and understand myself as far as the model that you have over on your channel. You create this free content to build the trust and the authority in the subject matter that you're going to teach in your premium courses, and then you release 1 to 2 premium courses a year, and that audience that you've kind of gained from the free YouTube content are primarily the folks who are signing up and paying for your course, and even if they're not, they're telling others about your course. Is that correct?
Yeah, you've got it. And I know for myself personally, I've learned so much on YouTube, and I love how much of my own personal career and education I owe to, YouTube University, as it were, as a whole. And so even thinking myself, yes, I do learn a lot piecing videos together, but being able to offer customers or people a more of a curated journey where it's step by step brings in a lot of value. So you're right about the business model, and as far as the value, kind of packaging that up in a way where someone feels like they're staying on track even when they're new to the software without missing any vital information is what I try to offer through my courses.
How are you creating these courses? What software company are you using? What have you learned along the way? So give us a couple of pointers for folks listening who want to create their own courses.
Yeah, so I host everything on Podia. Podia is a pretty decent all-in-one platform, probably very similar to Teachable and platforms like that. As far as if for other people, if they're interested, what goes into it, I suppose it depends on your comfort level of producing a course beginning to end. There's a lot of little skills that come together in producing a polished course. From outlining the content, you have to be certain, or you want to be as optimistic, or you really want to know your audience in order to make sure the content you're teaching is something that they need and want and value. And then, of course, from an organizational standpoint, creating a thorough outline. From there, I go through in real time and I do a combination of recording my face when explaining certain concepts and topics, but a lot of screen recording, of course, of the software as well. And then I edit and produce the whole thing in DaVinci Resolve, and then upload those courses, those video modules with supplemental text and stuff to Podia, the platform that I do the selling and hosting of my courses on.
So I think a lot of folks that whenever they hear, they're creating a course, they're making money, they're doing this or that, I think a lot of the issues, or not issues, but kind of roadblocks that folks kind of come along would be that they don't feel like they are someone who folks would listen to, or they don't feel like they know enough. Or is that a roadblock that you had to get over? And if so, how did you do that?
Yes, and I can relate. I am lucky in that my actual full-time job before I started doing this on my own really was where I was paid by my employer to be this expert. And I learned a lot of the skills I use today to kind of feel comfortable as someone who's being a bit of an authority. So everything from having to do live webinars, which I had to do at my previous job, also teaching in front of, small groups at some of the world's most respected brands, all the way to presenting in front of groups of hundreds of people in a live setting, are all things that forced me to get comfortable with teaching. And I think that translates well into YouTube and with courses and with YouTube video, because unless you're doing live courses, because it's all something that you can record ahead of time and produce, it really offers, in my mind, a bit of a safety net. So any sort of teaching or instructional experiences you can give yourself that helps build that confidence. And then, of course, you have to remember there's always somebody who is behind you in their journey and whatever you're learning. So even if you feel basic, whatever you learned yesterday or the week before is something you could still pass down to someone else. And so I think keeping in mind that you're doing other people a favor by sharing what you know is something that I think makes it easier. And the last thing I'll mention is in line with what I was talking about before. I did Toastmasters for a while, which I often forget about, but just being exposed to situations where you have to communicate clearly to other people. It's just something that we often have to practice if we're not used to interacting face to face.
And you can use those YouTube videos as a sort of proof of concept, right, for your courses, because I've done some courses myself before, and the videos that have done well in those audiences, you kind of see where the need is, and kind of look at other courses in the space. Is that correct?
Absolutely, yes. I try to pay as close attention as I can to what content resonates, both on my Instagram as well as YouTube. And then anything that gets is an outsized performer, that's usually a signal that there's something there. And if you can dig deeper into that subject, you can probably offer something that's needed that your audience wants.
Yeah, absolutely. So now let's focus a little more on the YouTube side of things. What are some things that you did early on with the channel that you think have really helped you grow to the rate at which you've grown thus far?
Sure. I think for me, my superpower, or my competitive advantage, if it were, is just, I think, the way I communicate. And that's something that I've seen as a thread throughout all the content I've produced. People have been kind enough to inform me that they're appreciative of how I explain things. And that could be the cadence in which I speak, or it could be the way I present information or the analogies I use. I think that, you don't want to give information in a way that makes you sound smart. You want to give information in a way that helps people grasp the concept as quickly and easily as possible. And I was also slightly lucky in that some of my earlier content in 2015 was before the space was as, I don't want to use the word crowded, but some of my content was filling some holes in what was available. So some of my total beginner, very, very basic, like here's how you can get up and running in this software in 15 minutes, giving some people a quick win who've never touched the software, and also empowering them with that, I think is what helps people say, hey, this, it grabs someone's attention and it encourages them to stick around.
And I want to interrupt you there, and then I want you to continue with this answer and give us a couple more things that have kind of helped you along the journey. But I will say this, doing tutorial videos on YouTube for almost over a decade now, I don't have like one primary focus as far as like, I don't do it just on one bit of software like you do. But I will say this, the thing that I've learned, and I have this written somewhere on a notepad when I was doing some kind of research a long while back, is making something difficult easy. And I know that sounds cliche, and I know it sounds stupid easy, but that's really what you're trying to do. You're trying to take something that is overly complicated, maybe it's not, maybe it is, and to certain people there's going to be different levels of complexity, right? But you're trying to take that thing, break it down, and explain with your analogies and your instructions and make that thing easy.
100%, yes. And I think that, again, I constantly am trying to remind myself to be a beginner again, because unfortunately, having done this, use the software for just over a decade now, I do suffer a little bit from the curse of knowledge. So I'm often very grateful for the questions I get in email and Instagram and on YouTube, because it reminds me of the actual frame of mind a beginner is in. And so something else that I will say, I didn't start doing this necessarily, but well, I guess I did. So even at my previous employer, where I would have to create blog posts, like essentially any of the technical content that was created to educate the users of the software, I was doing that in the form of live webinars, written blog posts, and instructional content, as well as teaching in a classroom setting. So all those different formats of teaching really helps to hone and improve the videos. And I will say, this is maybe a little hard to do for YouTube, but when you teach in person, you can at least see people's body language, and you can start to notice when you're losing them. So that translates into, on YouTube, remembering to create engaging content, break it up, don't be monotonous, things like that.
Absolutely. I could not agree more. Now let's talk about something that you wish you would have known sooner, like the things that you look back at now and you're like, holy cow, if I would have just done that, or if I would have known that sooner, that would have really been helpful.
Sure. Yeah. I think that knowing why you're making videos and what your goals with creating videos on YouTube as a platform, I think is very important. I think most people think the point of YouTube is to get as many views and subs as possible, which I probably did for a long time as well. But having views and subs doesn't solve any real world problems. People who have sincere goals and clear goals, they get rewarded sooner, and the path to their success becomes really, really clear very quickly. So for me, if someone had explained that to me, I would have been able to distill my goals, which are now, one, to make the best learning content on product visualization in the world, and two, to build a profitable business that people are eager to support. And without those two goals, there's so many ways I could go with YouTube content, but the goals are what helps drive the content and ensures that I'm getting rewarded throughout that process, which is, I think, what helps keep you going.
Yeah, I could not agree more with what you just said. That's knowing your why is extremely critical, and so I'm so glad and thankful that you mentioned that. I want to talk about the monetization side of things. Looking at your numbers, you are obviously at a size of which you are able to, monetize with ad revenue. So I want you to talk about the ways that you're making money via YouTube, and if you don't mind sharing some numbers to give my audience a little more realistic view of kind of what they're looking at. So the money you're making with ad revenue, partnerships, courses, that kind of thing. Speak of just the whole monetization as a whole for your channel and the process of getting where you are now.
Sure. Yeah, great question. So I will say that I get some ad revenue on YouTube. I think that typically, for an audience my size and the way ad rates go, I think I'm anywhere between $150 and $180 a month US dollars, so not a ton in ad revenue. But again, I think I hinted at this earlier, with having a product to sell, the YouTube channel is the top of my funnel. It's kind of this discovery engine. And so that gives people a lot of free content. And then, of course, when they choose that they want to support me and when they want to invest in their developing their skills, they have my courses they can buy. And so with those, they do well, certainly more than 6 figures a year. I'll leave it at that. I'm still learning because I'm only just entering year 2 of this. So I don't quite know where that's going to even out as far as growth goes. But basically, I will say, as far as I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Partnerships. I've done some partnerships where with companies that make equipment like my computer. I did a trade for them where the machine I use with rendering requires a lot of compute power. So these are not cheap basic computers. So right. I partnered with them to get equipment, not necessarily like a dollar exchange there, but again, that was because I felt super aligned with what they have, and I wanted to make sure my audience, who is constantly asking me for computer recommendations, where they should go. So I actually approached them with that question. And then I think outside of that, I think that's pretty much it. In the past, I have tried Patreon, and I've also toyed with the idea of like a small paid community, but I have learned that, and this is counterintuitive. I was telling somebody this the other day. For other creators, I think it's important to realize that it's not always the best idea to monetize in every way possible, at least in my opinion. I purposely limit the number of ways someone can financially support me. And the reason is I just found it so hard to make a profitable business model off of something like Patreon with an audience my size. Whereas I can offer them a course that has real value at a very good price, comparative to the value they're getting. But in order to reach the same revenue that generates through something like recurring monthly donations, I just haven't found a good way to make it work. So I try to give everything else away for free, and then make sure that the thing people are able to buy when they want to support me is enough to keep my business running, if that makes sense.
It makes a lot of sense. And what is the average cost of one of your courses?
So my two flagship courses are $400, $399 each, and then I offer them in a bundle,
right,
for a little bit less. And then I have some lower price point courses. I've got a bundle at $120, and then I've got a couple courses in the $20 and then the $60 range. So I kind of have these different tiers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the thing is when you're creating free content like what you're creating, you don't always have to have the largest audience, right? So when you're selling premium courses at the price that you're selling them at, and people are willing to pay that because they're high quality courses, you are able to, create the source of income you have created by not having to, have such a large audience. Can you speak on that a bit? Because I think that's a misconception that in order to sell these things, you've got to have just a tremendously large audience.
Yeah, 100%. So with what I teach at this point, it's specific to a certain type of software that caps my potential audience, period, before I even get started. And then, of course, naturally, I'm only going to capture a percentage of the total users of this software. And then there's churn. So customers every couple, 2-3 years are probably going to fall out. So when I look at those numbers, I realize that my audience size is limited to probably under 50 to 100,000, which I know can sound like a lot, but when you're talking about a global potential audience, that's a pretty small slice of potential customers that you then have to go after. So when you do look at serving a very niche audience, you need to understand how much customers are willing to pay for solutions to their problems. So when you go for a small audience, you do need to make sure you find the ways to offer a lot of value and be competitive there. But then the other vital part of that is making sure you build a system to ensure that you capture customers. So if someone comes across you, how can you get as many of your potential audience members to discover you? And then once they do see some of your content, how do you make sure you capture them somehow on an email list or get them to subscribe? Some way that you can communicate with them down the road so that when you do have something to enrich their lives, they're ready to and able to buy. Because so the smaller the potential audience is, I think you do need to be fairly strategic in how you kind of interact with and capture that audience. But at the same time, it is a nice place to be because like you said, you don't need a massive audience. I'm not going for viral videos. I'm not trying to get more views. I'm just trying to make sure that everything I produce is valuable to my small existing audience.
Yeah, I could not agree more with that. So I'm not going to really expound upon that. You did a really good job of that. As far as like the YouTube channel itself, what have you done as far as like tinkering around with changing thumbnails, titles, the way you design your playlist, things like that? What are some things that you've done, kind of little, kind of really detailed things that you can look at and say, these are some things that have contributed to some of the success I've seen?
Great question. So I admittedly have not been great at the YouTube strategy, the really small stuff. I've tried to focus mostly on just making sure the content is good, but I have heard plenty of people make the great point that if someone doesn't click on your video, then they're not going to get to the good content. So you need to make it clickable. You need to make the title irresistible. I'm working on that. I'm learning about it. The big thing that's tough is the whole like following a formula, like make sure you've got your face on there. Make sure you look super emotional on there. Make sure there's something somewhat sensational in the title. I did a bit of an experiment a while ago where I tried something in that vein, where I did more of a reactionary video where I was taking my Instagram followers who submitted images and I basically critiqued their images live, and I kind of not live, but I broke down what I liked, what I thought could be improved and all that. And and I did that twice, and in both cases, they super outperformed my other content. So, and that's the case where I put my face on the thumbnail. I look super emotional, surprised, or whatever it is, and I've got this kind of built-in authority in the title saying something like product visualization specialist critiques your renderings type of a thing. So creating some intrigue.
Right.
So that was where I tried to take some of what I've heard a lot of like your guests and other people say you should do. And then it was also a little bit more entertainment based. Yes, it was educational, but there was an entertainment slot like angle to it. And those did perform well got a lot of views, grew the channel a little bit. But I would also argue that those probably were not the most quality views as far as my business bottom line goes. So it's a give and take. And I'm constantly learning, and I'm just trying to create better thumbnails, better titles, and pay attention to that audience retention graph, which on technical tutorials like I make is very hard to keep high.
Yeah, no, it is. I know that for a fact. I had to really, early on, I had to understand that I don't really care about 24-hour to 48-hour views. It doesn't mean anything to me. It doesn't mean anything to my bottom line financially. It doesn't mean anything for, because my type of channel is different than an entertainment or a news-based channel where they're looking for those quick views and they're looking for this and that. I'm looking for the long tail. I'm looking for videos that are 3 years old to still be bringing people to my website and to my podcast, thus helping me make more money via sponsors and things like that. So understanding that's, and it goes back to what you said earlier on, right? In that knowing why. What is your why? Why are you making these videos? Who are you making them for? Who are you trying to help? Who are you trying to entertain? And knowing that is very helpful.
Absolutely, yes.
So that's kind of where I'm at there. My last question for you is this: what's next for the channel? What are you looking to do? You've been doing this kind of full time 2 years now. So what are you looking to do, kind of long term and short term?
Yeah, great question. So the thing is, the courses I make now, and I'll mention this: anyone who's looking to do something similar, start small. I started with small courses, and I worked my way up. My courses are big. They're 20 plus hours. They're mega courses, and they take months to produce, and you pretty much reach burnout doing that. Like I give myself tendonitis editing hundreds of thousands of cuts because I take out every little and all that.
Well,
anyway,
I will say this: you're about to be at the point, though, as far as financially, where you are able to hire someone to do all of that, right?
Absolutely. Actually, I just hired my brother on a part-time basis. So I am in this process of delegating a little bit, but not because I hate doing the work. So I can produce more content. So in between these course releases, what's next for the channel is I'm trying to hit a cadence where I publish without fail every week, but it's not just a YouTube video. It's a bit more of a bigger play because I'm trying to grow organic Google traffic to my website. So every week I write an article, very in-depth, as much in-depth on the topic as I can. I then condense that into a outline for a YouTube video, which allows me to take the best parts and boil it down to like a sub 10-minute video. I then record the whole video myself and the screen capture. I also then record a voiceover of talking head using my teleprompter, narrating everything I did in the video. And then I send those clips to my brother, who is now compiling and editing those. And then I'm also creating some social media, some even smaller carousels, things like that, tight pieces of content. And then at the end of a week, that's 1 week's worth of work. We get all that together, and I write an email newsletter to my email list, and I bundle all that up, and I hit publish on everything at Monday morning. So there's content from, pocket-sized single images to 2,000-word article to a 10-minute tutorial. And it's just this coordinated effort where each week I'm trying to take one topic that's useful to my audience and publish it. And I'm hoping to just keep kind of refine this process so it becomes sustainable. Because right now it's a lot of work, but I'm slowly bringing in the help I need to keep that cadence up. And I just want to basically own this market entirely. So
I love that. That's amazing. I remember when I realized that what I had set myself up to do was to create 2 podcasts every week and to create multiple YouTube videos every week and do this and that. And I realized very, very quickly that, man, this is tough. This is work, and it's a lot of it. And it's way more than 40 hours, way more than I can do. And so what I did is I jotted down some things that I didn't quite enjoy as much as the others, and I offloaded those, and that helped me so much. And so it's really cool to hear that you're doing the same thing. I will say this, you've been an amazing guest. You've got an amazing business model. The YouTube channel that you've created is only going to get bigger. So Will, thank you so much for joining me today. And can you let my audience know where they can get in touch with you?
Absolutely. YouTube.com/Will Gibbons if you want to look at my channel. Otherwise, willgibbons.com is where all my work goes on the internet.
Absolutely. And all of that will be in the show notes as per usual. And Will, thank you so much, and we'll talk to you next time.
All right. Take care. Thank you so much.
You've been listening to the YouTube Creators Podcast. We want to thank you and invite you to subscribe to the show, as well as support us on Patreon for great perks, such as having your YouTube channel featured on the show and a link on our website. Until next time, keep uploading those videos.